In today's episode, we interviewed Dagny, which is really exciting because neither Mitra nor I really knew anything about Dagny.
Yeah, it's the first time going blind into an interview, kind of just letting what emerges, yeah, following our interest, dialogue.
Mm. And to give you listeners a little sneak preview, we talked about some of Dagny's spiritual experiences, as well as, interestingly, the ways that she really embodies a reconciliation of certain paradoxes, such as spirituality and science.
Yeah, being a mother, being in the circling space for over 10 years.
Yeah. So we hope that you enjoy listening.
Enjoy.
So I don't even really know where to begin asking you questions. Default ones coming to my mind, like, what do you do for work? When did you start Relatefulness? But I don't really know what's relevant because I know so little about you, Dagny.
But I actually thought you asked me to come to this podcast because I've been doing this for so long, like 11 years. So my first circling weekend was like, I think it was the second or third German show I had.
Wow.
So I'm like a dinosaur. Yeah. So that was I was pregnant with my third child. I was going to give birth in a week. I didn't know that by then, but I was like
Wow.
100 kilos. And I really wanted to get away for a weekend because I was so tired because of the other two children. So a friend of mine told me about this weekend, and they made me sit in this big, good chair. All the others picked really bad chairs, and I have a good chair. And I remember when I almost couldn't walk because I was so heavy.
Wow.
And when I got there, I was like, this is really weird. Everybody are talking about their belly and stuff. And I remember on the second day, I started to talk about my body as well, like my body. And the last evening when I went home, I felt I float in the air. It was something which had happened to me, and it was amazing. And the birth 1 week later was the best birth ever because I was so present in them. That helps a lot. So after that, I've been doing this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Many weekends and immersions and the SAS in 2016.
Huh.
Yeah, it's an amazing practice. I really love it deeply.
Before that immersion, did you have like other practices you had done before, or was like circling the beginning?
No, I have actually been doing meditation since I was 17. So, but that was like at that time, it was only one meditation I knew about in Norway. It was very rare to do it. It's 33 years ago. So it was a very psychologically oriented method about being accepting to what emerges in your consciousness, awareness. And I remember thinking that I really missed something more spiritual in that method. But I did that every day for many years. And then I got children, so I took a break, and then I found circling and related.
I imagine in the time that you've done circling and relatefulness, your relationship to it has probably changed, and like your understanding of it has probably changed as well. And I'm curious if you could speak to some of those ways that it shifted.
Yeah, that's a really long story. Yeah, when I started with circling, my perspective on things was very research based. I have a PhD. I'm a professional background as a researcher, and I was very scientific and very mainstream in a way. And then I got my third child and started circling, and that kind of opened my consciousness quite fast and sudden. So I started getting a lot of non-ordinary states very spontaneously. Of course, at the time, I didn't know that was non-ordinary states. So because I didn't know that concept. So I really was wondering what was going on with me. I remember I talked a lot with Sean Wilkinson in that time, and I remember saying to him, I just need one normal day because it was so much. And then I started to read a lot. I have always kind of found a lot of meaningful perspectives in books, so I started to read to find out what was going on with me. So of course, I started with Ken Wilber and his perspectives on consciousness development. I'm sure you know all about that. Most of you.
But
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I started this book called Integral Spirituality, and that's, I think I read it 10 times. I still really don't understand all of it. It's so difficult. He writes real difficult in my opinion. But I understood that he is talking about these different levels of consciousness, and I understood that what I was experiencing had something to do, kind of stuff. And then I moved on to a lot of Eastern stuff like non-duality and stuff. And I also remember one of the first books I read was Meditations by Mark Aurelius, the Stoic. And he has this, that made a lot of sense to me. He has this whole thing about the universe being a living consciousness. We all are a part of them. That's so very meaningful to me. And then I came to Carl Jung and the Jungians, and after that I basically read the Jungian stuff. So that's my perspective on stuff. My meaning making now is a lot about the ego, which is our like socially constructed self, or the conscious self we operate in the world with. And that, to me, these processes are a lot about the ego connecting with the archetypal forces in the unconscious and the wholeness in the psyche. So in short, very short, that has been my journey. And 3 years ago, I also started writing a blog about the different perspectives I have read and accessed in this exploration. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does totally. I get the sense that like you are really. I feel like I'm getting I'm getting the archetype of the researcher, and I imagine you're like really good at learning all the material and then like applying it in a way. Feels like unique amongst circulars. Different.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been really important to me because the experiences of non-ordinary states are so intense and also transformative. Like it has really changed the way I perceive myself and others and reality. And that is experiences which I don't really share a lot because I don't feel many people understand. I think you guys would understand it if I went into detail with it. And also many other people in the Relateful and Surfing community. But otherwise, it's been really important to me to read these books because it made me feel less alone. Like I felt I read about other perspectives from people who had experienced similar stuff. And also I forgot to mention the mystics in different religions has also been really important to me. What they write, like in the Christian mystic and Sufi and Kabbalah.
I am very curious to learn more about what you mean by non-ordinary states, and then also another angle of how is it for you being with your family? Because I imagine, I don't know if this is true, but I imagine that they may not be able to relate to that.
Yes, it's funny because I actually had a lot of non-ordinary states with my son the first year when I was in a maternity leave. One of them was, one of the most intense was, and with non-ordinary states, I think you may describe it as different states in the brain, but I'm not really sure what it is. But to me, it feels like accessing other spaces in the consciousness where you notice more or other stuff than in the everyday reality. I think in the Eastern, they also compare it to different states like awake and dream and dreamlessly. And yeah, they have these different descriptions. I think about it as perceiving reality in a different way than when you are in your everyday reality or everyday consciousness. But anyway, I was out with my son in this, and I had him in when a baby lies in what is that called?
The stroller?
Stroller, yeah. And I remember I was crossing a bridge, and then I felt like I came into this emptiness, and it was like an emptiness I had never felt before. And it was like everything was sparkling like a crystal. And I remember thinking, is this good? Is this bad? Is this normal? And I couldn't figure it out because it was like those categories weren't there in that space. And I remember thinking, if someone sees me now, they think I'm Dagny because I look like Dagny and I walk like her, but the Dagny I have been all my life is gone. And I remember thinking that, and then I don't remember anything more. I think I don't remember how I got home, and that's like a 30 minutes walk with my son in the stroller. So it was very intense, and that's one of many experiences I have had. Which I think in meditation that they may talk about in different ways, but the impact it had on me was that I felt more. I think all the state experiences have made me feel less identified with my historical individual self and more identified with something larger. Like I know there is something like we are more than the persons we are born as. And that gives me a freedom, or it feels like I'm less attached to darkness things. Of course, I'm really attached to myself, but it feels like I have more freedom in it in a way.
Have you found, like, with your kids, do any of them sort of pick up on any of this, or are they kind of like doing their own thing completely?
Yeah, I think my relationship with my children is one of the things which have changed the most in this process after I started circling, because I feel I have been more able to tune in on their reality. So I think they have been very impacted by my journey. But I also think they pick up on stuff. I remember I often have experienced it as a process of dying and rebirth, like a continually development. And I remember my daughter once said to me, I had just come home from an immersion and I was in the shower or something. And she told me, "Mother, I think you are giving birth to your dying."
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, that's quite accurate.
Well said. There's this other question in me of like, I did my first Sean and John immersion like maybe like 10 years ago or 9 years ago. And I wonder, has your, like what you get out of the practice or what you're seeking or how you're like, your way of being in the circle, has that changed over time or the,
Yeah, a lot. I felt for the first years, I would say, I felt I explored a lot of emotional expressions, which it was like I had been living in a very narrow box, and the box got bigger because I accessed a lot of emotions, a lot of sadness and anger and all the difficult stuff like sadness, anger, sexuality. Yeah. So I think I didn't really go there I don't think I really knew why I needed to go to those emotions, but it was really important to me to go there. But I spent the first years feeling a lot, I would say, and I also got a lot of images all the time, and I didn't understand those images, but with time I learned to interpret them in a way which made me understand the processes in the group more. And now I think the practice to me is much more about just not feeling so much pain, maybe, but just be. I usually be really amazed by the beauty of the spontaneity which is emerging, whatever is happening. Like I feel it's like participating in a work of art. It doesn't matter the content that much. doesn't matter to me, like the subject of the conversation isn't that important to me. But now it's more like watching an organism grow and live together in the group, which I still feel is so beautiful. And it also always brings me back to myself in a way when I participate in sessions at Relateful, because I have a very intense full-time job and 3 children, and it's a lot of tasks and expectations all the time. So having this space of really reconnecting with myself is so important to me. I think it's such a gift. So I think I've gradually I've been through a process with a lot of emotions, and then starting to making more sense of what was going on with these pictures I got, and now it's more like just seeing the beauty of whatever is going on. It's really a privilege every time in those groups.
You seem to have a real spiritual grounding in your life, or that's how I'm imagining it. Like, it seems like maybe it's not something that you do necessarily, but it's something that's so present for you that it really shapes the way that you relate to yourself and the other aspects of your life. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean with spiritual grounding.
Like for instance, if I were a city designer, then whenever I go to a new city, my way of looking at the city would be informed by my knowledge of, like what's what, and, like this is coded this or whatever. And I imagine for you, because of your spiritual experiences or something else, the way that you maybe relate to life, not even consciously, but just the way that you are, it seems like it's very informed by your spirituality or spiritual experiences.
Yeah, that is true. I have always been very. I haven't called it spiritual, but I think I've always been very open to what's not physical in a way, or what is more. And my parents are Christians, so I was raised as a Christian. But I started feeling that that was a too narrow framework for me at some point. Like, I think there are many frameworks which are true and make sense in this context. And I also remember when I was a child, I always thought, why do we need to go to church? Because God is in the forest or in the nature. And I always communicated with trees when I was a child, so I had this animistic inclination early on. So I think you're right about that. That it's an important part of my, like, who I am, like, naturally. Now I start to feel super weird.
I actually had the
Not everybody gets that with talking to trees, but I think
I had the opposite question that was like, were you able to preserve that sense of communion with the trees and nature doing a PhD, or did you have to recover that at some point?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Mitra, because there were some years there where I suppressed a lot of myself, I think, and was very research focused and very scientific. And I've always been very, like, intuitive, like feeling a lot of things. And I stopped listening to my intuition. And yeah, there were some years, but it really came back. I think it came back when doing my PhD, after like 3 years, I burned out. And I was quite ill for like 3 months, I think. And a friend of mine told me to go to this bodywork thing. And then that was a spiritual practice. So then I kind of reconnected with it and got well.
Oh.
So I think the burnout partly probably was caused by this suppression of the spirituality in my life, I think.
I remember I had studied a lot of philosophy and religion, and I applied to a bunch of PhD programs in religion. This is like, I don't know, decades ago. And all of the schools, when I told them about like I'm really interested in practice and like the spiritual elements of the religion also, and all of them said like, don't tell anyone that. That's not what we do here. Keep that private. That's not.
It's ironic, isn't it?
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's that's a theme in my life actually. The relationship between spirituality and science. It's not the easiest thing.
Yeah, can you say a little bit about how you maybe reconcile some of the seeming contradictions there?
Yes. Sorry, I'm laughing, but this is such a big question. Well, I think actually, because I really love research and I love science, I work with higher education and research professionally, and I think research-based knowledge is super important, and research is one of the most great human endeavors. And I have all that stuff, and I think higher education should be research-based. And I'm really scared of being anti-intellectual and negative to research, because I think then you quickly end up in very bad places where you don't want to be. But at the same time, I also want to acknowledge that there are more sources to truth than research and science. And I really love, I think Ken Wilber actually says in that book, Integral Spirituality, that shamanic practices also is a valuable and a legitimate source of knowledge and truth, for example. So I like that more inclusive approach to knowledge and research, which he has. But of course, in my professional context, there will be no understanding of that perspective. And I also have a family who is very scientific, so and not my children, but my brother and parents, and yeah. So it's like something I'm giving a lot of thought. And I think my hero, my Carl Jung, so my Carl Jung, he also had this conflict in his life a lot, because I don't know if you know his history, but he had this very close cooperation with Freud, and he was going to kind of be the new big psychologist after Freud, and then he got these spiritual or mystical experiences, and he told Freud about this. This is like very short version of this, and he got totally rejected by Freud, and was kind of threw out of the good company of his professional peers, and lost all honor and was called a mystic. And it was a big crisis in his life. And then he decided to really open up his unconscious for whatever it wanted to tell him. And that made him go on a journey in himself. And he experienced a lot in his subconscious, which basically has been the fundament for all his work later on. So I think this conflict is something we all have to struggle with in some sense, if we are open to mystical and spiritual experiences or non-ordinary states. I think I call it also non-ordinary states of experience, to be more like scientific in my language, to call it other stuff. Mm. So I laugh about it, but it has been a struggle as well. I'd say.
There's a question coming up in me that I'm not sure how to express, but it's something like one of the friends I live with here just traveled for 2 weeks, visiting family in other places with his partner. And I was talking to him last night. He mentioned how hard it is to stay sane or regulated and while traveling and visiting different places and the world, more or less. And and hearing your story of being in academia and being a scientist and also having 3 kids and navigating family, I feel like so often when people do these kinds of practices, it feels kind of refined or this rarefied bubble of sensitivity or health or connection to source or something. And then you could feel like everything else is kind of taking you out of that or making it harder to stay connected to that.
Mm.
And I'm imagining you have like learned how to dance that well, or had a lot of practice with that. Is that
Mm.
true?
Yeah, I love the question. I think it's a great question, and I also think it's something which has been a theme for thousands of years. Like in the Bible, you know, the New Testament, Jesus, the disciples of Jesus have this discussion: should we stay with our families, or is a Christian supposed to leave your family and just go with Jesus around? And Aristotle as well, or the Greeks have this vita activa and vita contemplativa, like what is. And to me, the first years I felt like the everyday life was a part, was something else than circling. But I think with time, it has melted more together. So, I don't have that separation anymore. I don't feel like I'm one person there and another in the relateful or circling context. I feel like I'm the same, even though maybe I don't talk about exactly the same stuff. but 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 I definitely feel that it's important to have these practices which allow me to connect with my inner spontaneous stream of life. And I also do a lot
Mm,
of yoga, like very slow yoga to like a meditation. And to me, it feels like if I don't do these practices, I lose some vitality or some aliveness. Yeah. So, but I really think that the integration between the two places in my life has become more neat
mm.
and more close. How do you guys feel about that? You know, do you feel that your everyday life is very apart from?
I mean, for me, I kind of, so I left the monastery like around 2 years ago, and
Mm.
I started a small community of friends that all had trained at the monastery before. And so I live on land with like 8 friends, and I still go to events and I work and everything, but I feel like I created like a core home hub that still has that intentionality or kind of culture of care and truth and sensitivity and all that. Um, and for me, at least where I am right now, I feel like I'd go insane if I didn't have that. So it was kind of necessary, like a halfway house or something.
Mm.
But I think increasingly hearing you talk about and reflecting on my own journey, like learning how can I stay close to my truth or like my true self in all the environments or wherever I'm around is like this growing challenge that I want to adopt more and more.
Mm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, so that makes sense because what I feel this practice do with me, at least over time, is that I more easily access the more parts of me in any situation. Like I'm more present with myself, whatever is going on. That, and that makes me feel more relaxed and nourished, and also more. I feel I'm much more powerful and impactful now than when I started. It has a very strong force when you're congruent, like when you what you feel on the inside is what comes out, and you seem very reliable to people. Is my experience, and you are being heard much more and listened to. What are you thinking, Kish?
Um, I'm reflecting on my experience being with you and then also on the question that you had asked. Like, I do feel like being with you, you, I guess authentic isn't like the best word for it, but you seem authentic. Like, you're there and I believe you, and I don't think there's something that you're hiding. So I was just kind of
Mm.
thinking about how my experience of you is similar to what you named. And then I do find it's like kind of hard for me to relate to your experience.
Me too, no, I'm just kidding.
I think that, and I was trying to figure out why. I think my relationship to spirituality and I'm still figuring it out. Like, I'm younger than both of you, and not that, you know, that matters so much, but matters a little bit. Like, I think at the monastery and maybe at that point in my life, there was a very specific, almost like spiritual goal. Like, I want to move towards enlightenment. And since the time I left the monastery, and especially recently, I've been feeling more like, oh, that's not for various reasons, that's not my goal right now anymore. And so I do agree with what you two are saying about showing up fully or more fully in various aspects of life. And I think for me, it's less about spirituality compared to before. More, I don't know what I would say it's like more about, like more about relationships or more about healing or security or something, but it's not as explicitly spiritual, or maybe I'm like going towards like more ordinary experiences, to use your language.
I love that actually. I'm sure you know this. What is it called? This ox picture in the
The
sun.
10 Oxford pictures.
Yeah. And I think the last it's about the awakening process, I think. And I think the last picture is he returns to the marketplace. Isn't it something like this, with open arms or something, like he wants to be in the everyday world? I love that kind of. I think that feels very true to me. And also it's something, and I think that's something what I tried to maybe describe about my relationship with the practice now, like something about seeing or experiencing the sacred in everyday life, the holiness of everyday life. Yeah, I feel a bit impacted by saying that actually. Like, it's not necessary to have these round experiences or be enlightened, or I don't even really know what that means, but it's more about noticing everything, noticing stuff, and like looking life in the face somehow, like being open to what is here. That is beautiful. I've never really understood what the awakening or enlightenment really is. Like, that has only been words to me. So I've never had that as an explicit goal, but I really had, and I haven't had as a goal to connect with people either on this connecting reflections. But it's really been important to go there all the time. So I think I've had some kind of unconscious goal.
Yeah, for me, I'm one of the practices I've started adopting mostly this year was like kind of communicating with ancestors, and it's almost like
Mm.
trying to tap into a source of like unconditional ground of belonging or like positive connection, so that I'm not
Mm.
reliant on basically like being codependent with the people around me. And so it's like, can my ancestors hold the parts of me that are scared or like looking to other people in my surround, like I'm trying to impress this person, or I'm scared this person doesn't like me or something. And if I'm like connected to the land or nature or ancestors, then that's less, it's less, it feels less like life or death that this person in front of me likes what I'm saying. I think it's confusing. Like, is that healing, or is that spirituality, or is that secure attachment? Like, you know, you gotta use different words and stuff. Connection to source.
How do you connect with your ancestors, if you don't mind me asking?
There's one healer that I'm working with a lot, but a lot of it's kind of just like closing my eyes and just like verbally inviting them, the ancestors that
Mm.
are resourced and are feeling well, inviting them to come in, and then almost just having a dialogue,
Mm.
asking questions, or asking them to support me in some way. I had a while I was working with someone that kind of prescribed me formulaic kind of prayers with like a Christian God, and they never really connected in the same way for me. Even though I grew up Catholic, and somehow doing it with the ancestors feels much more relational.
Yeah, I feel that connecting with ancestors seems really deeply meaningful to me. But of course, at least in Norway, that's a very
Yeah, right.
weird
Totally.
thing to do. But we also have these indigenous people,
Hmm.
the Sami people. I don't know if you know them. They are actually, I think, originally from Asia, and they lived here before the Norwegian came. So they are
Hmm.
indigenous people and have these rights. And I have worked a lot with their research and their education, and they have these
Hmm.
ancestral beliefs and practices. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. Like they have this very living relationship with their ancestors and see them as guides, and that they are living parallel with them.
Mhm.
So that sounds really interesting.
I think Kish and I connected partly because like there's a sense of a little bit of like displacement of not having a strong, wide social support network or growing up more like
Hmm.
self-reliant, independent. So
Hmm.
for me, I think in the early years of circling, there was like this experience of like, oh, like people are like seeing me and like they really want to know who I am. I don't have to perform or be
Yeah,
impressive or something.
exactly.
But then after a
Yeah.
few years of that, it's kind of like that's still really great, but I don't want to go into the practice as like the primary. That's my primary motivation. Needing to source that
Hmm.
always from people or strangers.
Yeah, I relate to that as well. I mean,
Hmm.
you explicitly name me, but I relate to that, like going to the practice specifically, looking for, um, maybe I wouldn't have even been aware enough to say this at the time, but a sense of connection, a sense of security and love.
Hmm.
And I think over time, one of the things that I've seen is yes, you can get those in session, but it's also like in the session. It's like just in the session. It's kind of a similar wanting it to not be separate from everyday life. Like want
Hmm.
those relationships to be present even outside of the session. I want that kind
Hmm.
of thing to be
Hmm.
present even outside of the session. That's
Hmm.
kind of one thing that I've been doing, investing more in relationships. Sounds basic.
Yeah, but yeah, to me that has been really wonderful to really connect with some of the people I've been practicing with and um, getting these really deep friendships, which I love all my
Hmm.
friends, but these friendships in the relatefulness and circling communities are very special to me because we have shared so much. So it sounds great that you have felt more growing in that arena. But you are both living in Austin and going to the studio and are a part of that
Kish
context,
is in
or
Austin. I actually live in I live in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a different state.
okay. Mm.
Do you have?
But you have your
Yeah, I'm
house.
lucky. I have
Mm.
a few people. Good.
Mm.
Do you have like a local circling kind of group, or is it all online?
Well, there is a local group, but I don't really have time to.
Totally.
That's one of the great things
Right.
with Relateful. Like it's accessible for me because it's 1 hour online. So I don't really have time to participate with them. I think they meet every week in the center of Oslo, but I know them and they are wonderful people. They are everybody do this circling your stuff or transformational connection. Mm. And so they have had a lot of SASs in Oslo, so all the
Oh,
people who are doing it have done
Mm.
SAS. But they are really great.
I was in Oslo a few years ago for
Really?
a weekend workshop with Bloss, and Tala was there, and I met Renee there as well. I met some other people. Yeah, it's so nice to. Every culture feels, at least on the trip, where we're like very much in the local circling community, and of course we're bringing in some American flavor or something. Every culture feels very distinct.
In the Norwegian culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
That's a polite way of saying it.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but it's well.
Please.
I remember at least at that weekend, it was like there was like this stuckness feeling until the very end. And then it was revealed that like someone or maybe multiple people had anger that they weren't expressing. Like everyone was very polite, I think. At least that's what I remember.
Actually, I know Steven quite well since we met some years ago in the circling context. And he has been visiting me like 2 or 3 times. And also he has been to these Norwegian retreats, your meditation retreats. And he commented to me, he said like, isn't your country very conservative? And it's like, we are a very small country. We are only like 5 million people and really far north. And it's a country with very lots of mountains, so we haven't had that much social interaction. And actually a very poor country, and I think we have a very strong social control, like it's a very conform society. And also we had this in the 70s, we found this oil in the North Sea, so we have become very rich. So I feel we are also a very materialistic society. So yeah, we have some there. It's some specific, or it's a bit special. So I love this, connecting with people from other countries and learn about other people's perspectives and experiences of stuff.
I like the way that you name all of it. It's like very light, and even though you're in it and certainly affected by it, I don't hear any like blame or like I don't like this. It's like that's the way that it is, and
Yeah, because I always also love Norway. Like we have this great nature, and people really are close to nature here. We spend a lot of time in nature, and I think we are also kind of maybe a bit naive, but also quite idealistic. Like, we give out the Nobel Peace Prize, and yeah, I like to think that we have some values which are really good, and we have a strong democracy and I work a lot with government in my work, and it's a lot of trust in our democracy, and so it's a lot of really beautiful stuff. And we have a very strong welfare state. We care about vulnerable groups, and so I really love my country, but we have some weaknesses. Actually, and I did the coaching course now in the Relateful coaching course, and that was just great. I just recommend it warmly. It was wonderful. But that's a very to me, it has a very American perspective on freedom and agency, and in Norway we are a lot more about adjusting to social norms, and so it was like this perspective of actually choosing and freedom and agency, which impacted me a lot in the coaching course. In Norway, we are also very impacted by this, which we call jantelov, which is a rule about you shouldn't think that you are something. You should just be equal to everybody else. So we have a very, very strong value of equality, but that also makes us scared of being different, like this conformity stuff. And that came up a lot for me in that coaching course as well. And I felt I really got to process it in a good way. So that was like a cultural awareness increasing in me that course.
Were you able to like find a third option of like equality and fairness is good, personal agency, uniqueness is also good, and then somehow they combine?
Yeah, I think I'm working on that. But I actually had a really great. Have any of you done the coaching course?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because the decisive question. I had a great session with Valerie in the group about that, and that made me think that made me experience how this conformity thing is kind of a very outdated rule. Like it was important back in the days when we needed each other to survive, but yeah. So that helped me find the third way in a way, Mitra. That's to see that some rules I am adjusting to are really old, and it was good back then, but it's not true anymore.
Yeah.
Mm.
The question for Mitra and anyone listening is like, what bad thing happens if you get this thing that you want? Imagine maybe in that coaching session for you is like, what bad thing happens if you are totally conformist? And
Yeah, or it was more like I wanted to be more free to
I
express
see.
who I am, dependent of that norm of not being different. So I think the question was more, what bad things happens if I express who I am and not adjust to that rule about being the same as everybody else. And that created a lot of shame and fear in me. And then I got these images of the old rural farming societies in Norway where there were very few people and they needed to work together and cooperate really tightly to survive. And then maybe it was important to not be different. It was important to adjust to the society, the group, but that's not how it is anymore. So that was kind of a strong experience for me in that. And Valerie is a really great coach as well. So it was a good process.
I started doing that question inside my own head. I was like, I can feel I could feel
What
I could
thinking?
feel those patterns. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is the question is about what do you want to, or what is the good thing? What is the good way of being for you? And then you don't have that. And there is a reason for that. And then you ask, what is the bad things I unconsciously think would happen if I had what I want?
It's so funny because at the beginning of the call, I had this very generalization of like the European folks seem to be much more grounded and quiet and not so loud and brash and like chaotic like Americans. And so, but I feel like I'm getting the opposite side of it now. Of like, oh, it's the shadow of it.
Yeah, I guess there is possible to generalize something about Americans and Europeans, but I think there are a lot of varieties. But actually, I think it's interesting because I have a PhD in philosophical ethics, and in the ethical perspectives of the different countries, you can see some differences which are interesting. And also, my husband he works with movies, like in the movies, like other what is it called, like an institute which works with movies in Norway, and he is also talks a lot about American films versus European movies. Like you see some cultural differences there as well. So I'm not sure we are so quiet.
You said you work in philosophical ethics?
Yeah, I have a PhD in philosophical ethics. I don't work with that anymore, but I have a
That's
PhD in
such a
that. Yeah.
cool title. Okay.
Yeah, I wrote about an old discussion in the Antique about the Greek philosophers about rules and ethical judgment or discernment in the deliberation and choice about the right action.
Wow.
So it was like a lot about Aristotelian ethics. And he says that in his Nicomachean ethics, he says the discernment rests with perception. So that means that to figure out the right action, you need to perceive the individual concrete situation and notice as much as possible in a way, you know. And also, of course, he has this about virtues, that you are being guided by values, which is the virtues of the good person. I think his emphasis on perception is really interesting, also in the light of our practice, because I feel relatefulness is a practice which really refines your perception of reality and expands over time, expands your perception, and you notice more. And that's, to me, one of the most significant things with it, because it seems to me that you can live your whole life and not notice a lot of your reality and what's going on with other people and yourself. And to actually do this practice and be able to expand your perception of reality and notice more, is so valuable, or it has been extremely valuable to me. So that, I think about that a lot.
Well, I could do a separate podcast on like philosophical ethics, because I did a master's thesis focusing on existential and Buddhist ethics, and it was much.
Cool.
I wish I talked to you back then, because it was much more abstract and not grounded, concrete.
That sounds super interesting.
But yeah, what is true, and like how do you act well?
Hmm.
So, guiding me.
I thought the way that you presented relateful and perception and ethics is so clear, and there's a beauty in that too. Like, it feels so practical and grounded.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think to me, everything I read and write is to kind of understand my experience more and help me navigate the complexities of life. I actually remember John and Sean at some point got a lot of critique back in the days because they were so
Wild West.
focused on what was alive in the moment. So I remember they once got really strong critique for not setting a context on an emotion because they didn't see they didn't feel it was alive for them to set the context. And actually, I remember writing and respond to that critique, which took departure from Aristotle, because in that perspective, the truth kind of depends on the perception in the concrete situation. So in that perspective, it could be defended not to set the context.
Did you have more, Mitra? You seem like you have a lot.
Oh, my face is saying a lot. I was just sort of processing like what I've learned about you, Dagny, and I get this quality of like playfulness and like deep practical research scholar and interesting like embodied spiritual like zest. I don't know what the word is, but it's sort of it feels very bright and clear, and also I'm enjoying that like there's like a non-duality or like non-conflict between the aliveness and playfulness and like the depth.
Thank you. I must say that both of you to me, both of you feel very connected with like a deep silence. And that makes me feel like relaxed and safe. So like both of you embody some really deep wisdom or something which makes me really trust you in a deep way.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like also reflecting on this time together, I did learn a lot about you in a certain way, like way more than I knew previously. But at the same time, I feel like you're still such a mystery to me. I could like it feels like wow, I don't even know you at all. Even though looking back, I'm realizing okay, well, actually, I learned like this about Dagny.
Very rich.
I hope I get to meet you in real life at some point.
Yeah.
Are you ever coming to Europe? Any of you?
I won't be going there this year, but I'm not sure. I haven't been doing a lot of immersions recently, kind of intentionally, haven't been doing many immersions. I want to go to Portugal. That's on my list, my
Yeah,
bucket
that's
list.
good.
Yeah, but I will definitely let you know if I'm there in Europe or in Oslo. Or, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting experiments happening in Europe that I'm very curious about. And I also really hate leaving my home.
I can understand. I don't like traveling either.
So,
It's really stressful.
it's very hard. Yeah.
But you mean experiment in the relateful field?
Relateful and just like different interesting kind of I'm involved in like the liminal web or like meta modern integral kind of different spaces. And so I know like some billionaire rented this huge area in Stockholm and was making like a developmental practice space. And I know
Really?
John's doing his thing in Portugal, and
Haven't heard of it.
I can send you some links. Yeah.
Yeah, can you? That would be great.
Yeah. Seems like there's so many really cool ideas happening. But
Cool.
America feels
That's
kind of
good
behind.
news.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Dagny. Do you want to share your blog URL if people want to read more from you?
Oh, that's super nice. It is on the Relateful webpage in my bio.
I could put it in the podcast description.
Yeah, we'll link it. We'll find it and link it for you.
Thank you for inviting me. I think it's not that often I share about this stuff, so it really feels nice to do that. Thank you for this possibility.
Thanks for saying yes. The chance to know you better.
Thanks for listening to this interview with Mitra, Kish, and our guest facilitator. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe.
For more information, check out our websites, which we will link in the description.